I have never,
Well, I'll get used to
all
it.
of my...
Well, the day has finally come. Amazon's Lord of the Rings show, The Rings of Power, has premiered, with the first 2 episodes available to stream. And if you looked at the title of the video, I think it's pretty obvious where I stand. Yeah, the show is just pretty average, with some aspects that are really good. We'll get to that later. But the overall package isn't anything amazing. Now that, of course, is just looking at it as a show on its own merit, and not as an adaptation, because if we take that into consideration, then yeah, it's pretty bad. And in that regard, it really just reinforces the complaints that many had back when they were showing off the short teasers, the images, and what the cast and crew were saying in interviews. It's not very accurate. It's taking characters and events and changing them to tell a story that they want to tell, as well as introducing new original characters made up for the show. I've already mentioned this stuff in 2 previous videos, so check those out if you want. And many others have talked about it in much more detail than me. So it was no surprise when I started noticing the changes. So I just rolled with it, and let it take me on the journey and story that it was trying to tell. So to put it short, if you want an accurate adaptation, you're not going to get it here, which we already knew. And I really don't want to dive into all the changes. Instead, I'm going to leave that to the experts of Tolkien's works here on YouTube. They can go over it in much more detail than I ever could. Instead, what I want to do is just go over what I think of it as a show. And again, if you look at the title, you know exactly how I feel. I wasn't blown away by it, and it's really lacking in some very important areas. But first, let me just go over the few good things about the show. For starters, the visuals are really impressive, especially for a TV show. It is pretty close to movie quality in terms of special effects, CGI, and practical sets. It looks much better than I thought it was going to be, judging from the early teaser trailers, so this was a very welcome surprise. And so far, even some of the costumes and outfits look better than I expected them to. Those pre-released images really didn't help much. In the show, most of the outfits are actually solid, although there is one issue with the overall look of the costumes and the show in general that bugs me, and it's that a lot of things have a very clean look and feel to them. Like, a lot of the outfits look brand new and not really worn or broken in. Now, I don't expect them to be all dingy or dirty, but I didn't expect them to be so clean and look brand new or straight from the dry cleaners.
Doth mother know you weareth her drapes?
Also, I don't know if this is like an Amazon thing, but the show has this like glossy type of filter or finish to it that you can see in the trailers. And to me, it always just looks a little weird. I don't really know how else to explain it. It just looks a little polished or glossy. Also, there's a few bits of CGI that doesn't look the strongest, but it's not really a big deal, because overall, from a visual standpoint, it all mostly looks pretty good. Same with the music too. The composer of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit films, Howard Shore, did the intro track and the main theme, and it is good. But the rest of the series is being composed by Bear McCreary, the composer for God of War, and I think it's pretty good so far. Yeah, so no complaints in that department at all. But now it's time to move on to the issues, and that's basically everywhere else, or at least in the 2 most important areas, the characters and the story. Outside of Elrond and the stuff revolving around the dwarves, the characters are kinda lame, and after 2 episodes, over 2 hours of the show, they're still slowly setting up several storylines. I've been seeing people say that this is a slow burn, but the issue still remains with the characters themselves. Outside of Elrond and Durin, everyone else is kinda boring, which makes these slow burn plot setups really uninteresting. And the show is trying to set up so much with different characters that when things start to get interesting with one character or a group of characters, it immediately leaves them and starts following another group of characters that aren't interesting, and really it just starts to feel boring as hell. I mean, you got Galadriel, and her goal is to hunt down Sauron, which is fine, I guess, but Galadriel herself is really unlikable, so I just can't get invested in her story. I also like in her first action scene, they just show just how much better she is at fighting than literally everybody else. She's so good that she took out a snow troll while her whole company just watched. She even pulled off a few moves without even looking at it. I really just rolled my eyes at this sequence. There's also a storyline involving a new character who has a romance between him and this human chick, as well as looking into some orcs abducting people, but there's not much to really say about them. They're kinda dull. I mean, we saw one orc so far and it looked really good, but these characters are really shallow. And as for the Harfoots, they're okay, and their story involves the Meteor Man, and it's mildly interesting, but just like the other storylines, it's taken a lot of time to really get going. Really, the only aspect of the show that I was actually enjoying was the story with Elrond, Celebrimbor, Durin, and the dwarves. It's the most interesting thing in the show at the moment. Now, I've been seeing people online use the term slow burn storytelling as a defense, but they tend to forget that things can still be a slow burn, but the intrigue still needs to be there, and you should at least be invested into the characters. That way it makes sticking around for the slow burn story really worth it, because you want to see their journey. And unfortunately, the show is just really lacking in that department. I mean, to give you an idea how slow things are moving, it's been over 2 hours, and they haven't introduced anyone or anything from Numenor yet. But to be fair, it looks like episode 3 is going to introduce Numenorians, which means that even more storylines are going to be set up. Now, I wish I could speak on the action, but there just isn't much of it. There was a short battle sequence that was pretty cool, but so far, not many action scenes, so I can't really get an accurate judgment on that. So in short, so far it's pretty boring. It's a pretty good looking show with some good music, but the characters are mostly uninteresting. After 2 episodes they're still setting stuff up, and everything's just moving along at a snail's pace. So the story, the characters, and hell, even the action aren't keeping me engaged. Yeah, there's some pretty good looking visuals, but that's all it really has going for it. It all culminates to a pretty average show that I imagine no one would actually care about if it wasn't attached to one of the biggest IPs in the world. On its own merit, it just doesn't hold up, and as an adaptation, it's just straight up bad. I can't see many fans of the works of J.R.R. Tolkien enjoying this this show, but I also can't see many casual viewers enjoying it either, you know, just as its own thing, because damn, this shit's pretty dull so far. It's like, I went in knowing I'm not going to get a very accurate adaptation, so I was at least hoping that it was going to be entertaining, but I didn't really get that either. I mean, hell, look at something like the Middle-earth games. It messes with the lore a lot, and as an adaptation, it's just straight up inaccurate at times, but as video games, they are definitely a lot of fun, so at least it has that to fall back on. But with Rings of Power, it's not only a bad adaptation, it's not that great of a show so far. Now, I've talked to a few people personally who were excited for the show, who are fans of Tolkien's work, and they kept saying the same thing over and over again. I'm just happy we're getting something Lord of the Rings related. Well, this is that something, and I would rather have nothing.
It would be better if you gave me nothing at all.
Now, I've talked to the same few people recently after the first 2 episodes, and even they told me they think it's just okay. But of course, that's going to vary from person to person. I just want to share with you my personal experience. Now, I put out a post asking people if they were excited for the Rings of Power premiere. The vast majority didn't actually care, but there were still more people not excited for it than people that were. And after scrolling through these comments, I'm seeing kind of a mixed reception here. Some people think that the show is actually amazing. Others think it's trash. I actually had an interaction with someone named Nicholas who said I was going to be blown away by it. And I told him that I was going to hold him to that, and unfortunately, I just wasn't. Although if you enjoyed it, Nicholas, good on you. This really wasn't it for me. Honestly, I can see a situation like with the new Prey movie happening with Rings of Power, where that movie was overly praised even though it was just okay, and that was done in an effort to like counterbalance all the hate that it got. I feel like that's probably what's going to happen with Rings of Power. Except in this case, there's actually pretty strong legitimate reasons not to like Rings of Power. But because I'm seeing a lot of fans not enjoy the show, there's going to be a subsection of people who overly praise it to counterbalance the negative reception that it's getting. And that's already kind of happening now. I'm seeing people online saying that it's absolutely fantastic, mind-blowing, amazing, but I'm just not seeing it. And hell, since we're here, I guess I might as well mention this. I've been seeing a lot of supporters of the show go back and criticize Peter Jackson's movies because he did change a lot of things. And they use him and his films as a way to validate all the changes in the Rings of Power show. Except they always ignore the fact that Peter Jackson not only really loves the source material, but he went out of his way to win over the good faith of the fans. He made it clear that he was on their side and explained why they did things the way they did when making those films. Leading up to the release of Rings of Power, Amazon didn't really do that. They mostly just showed off images and teasers without really clarifying what they're doing. Then they let new supporters of the show and Tolkien fans just battle it out. And it really wasn't until recently that the showrunners actually started talking more about it. And unfortunately, they just demonstrated a complete lack of knowledge of Tolkien and his works. And they don't seem too interested in winning over the good faith of the fans. In fact, they're actually kind of arguing semantics, like how hobbits are in the Second Age. They felt it necessary to say, well, actually, they're Harfoots, not hobbits, and Tolkien never wrote about Harfoots in the Second Age. So we're just going to pretend Harfoots and hobbits are two different things now. And of course, you got supporters of the show misusing Tolkien quotes to try to validate their arguments. How that actually happened at Comic-Con during the panel. Yeah, so the supporters who keep bringing up Peter Jackson's films as a way to validate the changes in Rings of Power really aren't helping their case. But getting back on track here, the show itself, on its own merit, I wasn't impressed by. It's an average show that I don't think anyone would actually care about if it wasn't attached to Lord of the Rings. Pretty visuals, some good music, but really lacking in the characters and story department. So I watched the premiere, I gave it a chance, now I'm moving on. Hell, I'm just gonna watch House of the Dragon instead. But that's going to do it for the video, guys. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, go and drop a like on it. And leave a comment, let me know, what do you think about the Rings of Power show? Did you enjoy it? Are you excited for the next episode? Leave a comment, let me know. And of course, I want to give a nice big shout out to the channel members. You guys are my preciouses. If you're interested in becoming a channel member, click the join button down below and check out the perks. If they interest you, consider joining. Or not, it don't matter.
None of this matters.